Welcome to episode 27 of the LilyList Podcast. Today we have the incredible Heather Prall joining us, a talented artist whose work speaks to the balance of structure and chaos, much like her life journey. From an early adoption story to a structured upbringing, from a corporate career in HR to taking a leap into creative life, Heather's path is anything but conventional. In this episode, Heather shares the pivotal moments that led her to embrace her artistic passion, the deep personal challenges she and her family have faced, and the bold decisions that redefined her life, including selling everything to travel in an RV. We also discuss the importance of legacy, how she's guiding her daughter toward a life of creativity and independence, and the lessons learned from breaking free of societal expectations. Get ready for an inspiring conversation about resilience, reinvention, and the power of creativity in shaping our lives. As always, visit LilyList.com for more information on the podcast and platform. You can also contact us from the website if you have questions or ideas for people or topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. If you'd like to support the work of LilyList, you can donate using the links in the description, and if you find these conversations meaningful, we thank you for liking, following, sharing, or subscribing wherever you listen. Heather Prall, thank you for joining the LilyList Podcast. I'm happy to have you here. I have been lurking in the background, watching you push out your artwork for the last few years. And recently you pushed a piece out that I really connected with. And you mentioned sort of life journey and stories. And I thought that's exactly what we're trying to do with LilyList here. So I wanted to connect with you. So I thank you for joining us. And what I like to do with LilyList is kind of start back to your childhood. You know, we don't need to go through all the way through college, but, elementary school, middle school, early years, where'd you grow up? What was your childhood like? And, what were some of the things that kind of impacted you?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be a guest here. And just to give you some background. So I was actually born in Denver, Colorado, and kind of an interesting beginning. I was born to a 15-year-old mother, and she brought me home with the intention of keeping me without any support really from family or any resources. And that lasted for about 3 weeks. And birth father was kind of in and out of the picture. So she actually decided to give me up for adoption. And so I went through foster care, and then official adoption happened at about a year old. So I ended up with my adoptive family after about 3 months, and then the official paperwork happened about a year later. So I grew up in Thornton, Colorado, and just kind of a normal, very stable childhood, growing up in the same town, same house, same people, all the way up through high school, actually all the way into college. And then when I was in college, my parents actually ended up moving to Arizona for a job transfer. And at the time I was still living at home, and they were helping me out with some of my financial expenses with school. So I actually picked up and moved to Arizona for a couple of years, finished school there, and then returned back home to Colorado.
Do you have, I'm trying to think, I believe I don't know the actual numbers on adoptions in the US, but I believe you're the third guest we've had who had an adoption experience along their journey. And you said you were one when you were adopted, so very young. Did you ever go and sort of connect with your birth mother or look for her?
I did. So that's probably a whole other entire podcast experience. But I did actually meet her when I was 18. So I do, have some background and information. And I did at one point have my adoption records pulled, which was a bit of a challenge, but I was able to pull my records and just kind of verify some things that, I had been told, and go through that process as well.
Yeah. And I sometimes ask about kind of nature versus nurture, right? Genetics versus environment. And I wonder, as you grew up within this, which sounds like a pretty, I hate the word normal. I don't want to say normal, but it's kind of secure upbringing. Were there times where you kind of felt out of place, or just was there anything underlying where you just kind of felt like I'm not kind of meshing with this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, just my personality and kind of who I am, interests, things like that were always very unique to me. And so I think just, growing up as an adopted child and knowing that you're adopted, you always have those questions in your mind as to, am I like my birth family? Am I, like these people that I don't know, but I have this blood connection to, right?
Yeah. There was a point where I kind of felt like I don't really care what people think. I'm going to go off and kind of do my own thing. Did it ever get to that point with you where you just kind of felt like I'm not fitting in and I need to find a new path? Or was it just kind of an underlying murmur, for lack of a better term?
I would say it was more underlying. I grew up pretty much a rule follower, was more on the quiet, shy side. So I was not a rebel. I was not super outgoing. I was not a go my own way kind of a girl when I was younger. I was definitely, followed the structure, followed the rules, and was more quiet and kind of, just kept more to myself.
Okay. Was the artistic part of you there the whole time?
It was. So that really started to come out in the sixth grade. We had an opportunity to choose from a selection of elective classes, and art was the class that I chose to take. And interestingly enough, I had an aunt who was also an artist, and she had a t shirt printing company that she ran as a business, but she was also very creative and artistic and, created a lot of paintings and artwork on the side. And she took an interest in my exploration of art and took some time, sat down with me, bought me some supplies. And we ended up entering an art competition, a local art competition when I was in the sixth grade, and I won first prize.
Oh, wow.
And so that's really kind of what kicked it off for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
So moving, from sort of middle school to high school, you mentioned you were kind of shy and a rule follower. Did that kind of carry through high school? And did you find outlets for your art within high school?
Yeah, definitely both. So, there were always art offerings through school. And so that was something that I always elected to take, everything from drawing to pottery to painting. And so I continued to, really take advantage of those opportunities where I could within the school system
Okay.
and continue to be a shy kid.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have grounding from your family with regard, were they kind of religious or have specific traditions or anything like that you kind of carried with you as you went through these phases?
But I grew up in a very structured, routine environment. Religion did not play into that. My parents grew up with religion. And so I think a lot of the fundamentals of that, kind of played into that structure and routine that we had growing up. And, just the stability of, like I mentioned, growing up, same place, same house, same neighborhood, same people. There was just a lot of that routine and structure that just sort of naturally occurred.
Okay. And there is a reason I asked that question, not about the religious part, but just the
Yeah.
structure, because I'll get to it though after this question. Because as you move into college, did you go to college thinking, did you study art, or what was your college time like?
Well, it's interesting because senior year, I still really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea, and I didn't know what my path would be. I didn't know if I wanted to go to college. I had no idea. And one of the things that I was really interested in was interior design. And at the time, I was dating someone, and his mom, I was chatting with her one day. She had a career at one point early on in her life as an interior designer. And she actually heavily steered me away from going into that profession and just, told me that it was really difficult and that we just didn't have the market here for it, that I'd have to move somewhere else. And, it was really just incredibly challenging. And it was not a career path that she would recommend to me. And at that point in time, she was a teacher within the public school system, not doing anything related to, her original venture. And so, I kind of explored some different things. I went and did some volunteering, and I was doing some physical therapy work with kids at the time as a volunteer. And so I just kind of decided maybe that would be the path that I would take. All my friends were going off to college. So there was definitely, I felt some pressure to do that. And so still really not feeling super locked in or, having a lot of direction. I kind of just, I ended up at CU Denver and figured that I would, get through my first couple of years and then figure out if I really wanted to pursue this physical therapy route.
Yeah. And did you head down that physical therapy road or no?
Well, what's interesting is, so I ended up at CU Denver for about a year and a half. And then the timing of my parents moving to Arizona, I ended up switching schools and going to ASU in Arizona, and got there and realized they did not have a physical therapy program. So that was no longer an option for me. And I really wanted to go to ASU. I knew it was a really good school. And so I had to figure out then basically 2 years into college, I'm at this new school. What do I do? What are my options? And my undergraduate ended up being a bit ambiguous. My degree is in sociology, family resources, and human development.
Yeah.
But I loved the classes. It was all around the study of people and culture. And so a lot of women's studies. And so I really enjoyed the classes, and that's ultimately what I ended up basing my major on. And I felt like it was ambiguous enough that I could kind of go several different directions with having that undergraduate degree.
Okay. It's interesting. All of this that's my rolling around in my head here. And so were there any people, let's say high school and college, you mentioned, I think it was your boyfriend's mother who kind of nudged you away from interior design. Were there any people who really impacted you with regard to the direction you were taking during those times?
Not at all.
No.
I mean, it just felt, like I said, just very ambiguous. It's interesting. I hear a lot of people talk about, they had a high school counselor that helped to kind of figure out a direction or a path. And I really didn't have that. I didn't have that influence, and my parents were really great in not pressuring or pushing me to feel like I had to go to college or that I had to pick a thing. So it was really very open ended and just
Wow.
kind of, what do you want to do? Figure it out.
Yeah. But all of this is leading up to is interesting hearing you talk about kind of being a little bit shy and a little bit of a rule follower, and then the structured environment you grew up in. But then you really connected with those human aspects of the courses you were going on. And I mean, humans are nothing if not messy. And when I look at your art, to me, and I'm not a art expert at all. My wife does do studio art. She paints and sculpts a bit and stuff. But it's so funny because a lot of your pieces, some of them come across as very unstructured. Some of them, even when there is structure, it's almost to me, and you can push back on this, please, but it's almost fractal like.
Mm-hmm.
You can see there's a start of some structure, and as it expands out, the structure almost breaks down. So
Yep.
I'm curious, we've gotten through college, and I know you went into sort of corporate career, and we can chat about that, but that piece, your artwork is almost a mirror to me. And I guess that we could say that about almost any artist, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if that kind of connects with you in any way.
Yeah. So I think just as we kind of explore my story further, that will all come together and make
Okay.
more
All right.
sense. And you're definitely on the right path.
Okay,
That's your
great. Well, let's get into
interpretation.
that story more. So you get
Yeah.
out of college, you're going down a path. What is like early adulthood, 20s and 30s? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I blazed through college in 3.5 years. That was with transferring schools. And
Mm.
I was just really ready, even though I really hadn't figured out still even at graduation, what I would do. I was just ready to get out into the real world. I was ready to be on my own. I was still living at my parents' house at the time and just really starting to feel like I was coming into myself and feeling like I wanted to get out. I wanted to explore. The move from Colorado to Arizona was huge for me, having grown up in that routine, structured environment. And then uprooting I was 19 at the time and having to completely start over was pretty life changing for me, especially being a shy kid and having to go to this new place, all new people, making new friends, new job was incredibly difficult for me. And I went through a period of time where, it was incredibly difficult just emotionally for me to adapt to this brand new environment. And once I did, I really started to come out of my shell more so, graduated with this degree. At the time, I was working for Chase and the bank, and they had an HR department. I was kind of trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do with this? I want to make good money. I want to have a good career. And so Chase actually offered a mentorship program where they would pair you up with someone, within the building and you could explore different career options. So I ended up getting paired up with a woman in HR and I did a little bit of job shadowing with her. And her main duty was recruitment, bringing new people in. I thought, well, that sounds fun. You're dealing with people, so I can utilize my degree. It seems interesting. And, I interpreted it as a good career, a way to make good money. And so that was what I chose to do literally after probably a month of having this mentorship program. So not very long. And so then I started searching for jobs in HR. That took some time to find a position, but I eventually found another job in Arizona to start my career in HR. And then that was really kind of my starting point to, moving out of my parents' house and really kind of starting to get out into the world and explore a bit more who I am, coming out of my shell, meeting people. And it was a pretty big transformation for me just as a person, going from this shy, kind of scared kid to being out on my own and, just having all these opportunities to explore. So I worked in that job for a little under a year. And then I decided that I wanted to move back to Colorado. And that was really always part of the plan, was to move back to Denver. Denver was home. This was where all my friends were. And so I made that shift. Coming back here, continued to, work in HR for another 12 plus years. And just really never felt like I fit in anywhere, really never enjoyed the job and just was never passionate about what I was doing. And HR is really interesting because, I went into it thinking that it would be a way for me to help people. And I think that's how a lot of HR people view that position, that we're helping people, right, with benefits and leaves of absence and recruitment, bringing people into new jobs. But people that are not within HR typically don't view HR as people that are helpful. They typically view HR as the bad guys, right? Because we're the people that make you follow the rules. We're the people that keep the structure together. We're the people that, they view us as protecting the company. And so there's not a lot of love for people who work in HR.
Yeah. It's a tough spot. I think of HR in some ways, and I don't mean this derogatorily at all, but almost kind of like politicians. I think both sets of people generally get into it because they want to make positive change. And it becomes almost an impossible line to walk to balance, quote unquote, the people with whoever is actually making the rules and signing the checks and everything else. So
yeah, you end up really being kind of just a middleman, right, between the company and the employees. And so that can be incredibly challenging because you do have to follow certain rules and structure, and, employees want you to be flexible on something, and, they come in and you've got kind of people coming at you from both ends, right? And so it just becomes incredibly draining, frustrating, challenging. A lot of these places, it's all about protecting the company, right? So it's hard to go in and make changes or you know, help the company be a better place for people to work.
Yeah.
So you really kind of just end up being someone who's stuck in the middle.
As you were building that career, and I'll make the assumption that as you started out, there's kind of this positive, hopeful side, and then there's the reality. I won't call it darker, but more challenging side. And those things, the weights are going to shift up and down as you go. Were you at this point, you mentioned being shy, but then coming out of your shell, did you have a home life? Were there people around you that were supporting you? Or were you sort of career focused and not kind of worried about the personal side of life at that time?
Yeah. So I was single until I was in my 30s. So I was really on my own. And, I always wanted to have a family, but just that didn't happen until later in life. So it was really kind of just me. And the thing that I really struggled with too was, I got into this position. I felt like I was doing a really good thing. At a certain point, I wanted to advance. And I think I felt like that would help make things better for me if I was able to advance within an organization to a higher level. So I ended up getting my master's degree in business,
Mm.
thinking that would really propel me and lift me up and put me into a better position within that environment, better money. And so I went through that process and still just really ended up feeling incredibly disappointed by the companies that I worked for, the people that I was surrounded by. There are a lot of bad people that work within HR as well. So there's a mix, just like there is anyone else. And the people that work in HR that are making everyone else follow the rules aren't necessarily always following the rules themselves. And so I struggled with that a lot. I had bosses that were doing things that would have, they would have fired other people for doing those things in the workplace. And so then you're in a position where it's like, do I become a whistleblower? Do I leave the organization? And so I was put into a lot of positions within these companies that were just really awful positions to be in.
Yeah. And so you said later in life you kind of got your family started. Were you still working when you did that? Working in HR or
Yeah, I was. So I was almost 30 when I met my now husband. And so we got married and we went through a pretty long infertility process
Mm.
and ended up going through an IVF journey with multiple miscarriages. And we ended up with a daughter. And then we really got to a point where they told us that we were at the end of our journey after a couple of years and that there was nothing more that they could do for us with the IVF journey. And so it was right after, well, I guess our daughter was almost a year old and I had been working in HR. I had my last position, I was working remotely. And so I had her home with me for the first almost year of her life. And the organization went through some really big changes that initially we thought were going to be positive changes, acquiring and merging with other companies. We were a very small company. So we initially thought we were growing our company, and that completely got flipped on its side. And there ended up being, with these mergers and acquisitions, massive layoffs. So I spent the last year of my career laying off almost all of our original group of folks that had built this company up because of some things that were going on, some fighting amongst board members and people who had shares, and people kind of trying to take this company over and bring family members in and run the organization with their family members. So I was one of the last people to go, being HR. So I was laid off with my company. And so I was really kind of at a crossroads as to where I go from here. I was really burnt out. on what I'd been doing for the last 13 years. I had an almost 1-year-old daughter. My husband at the time had been working in the corporate world for a really long time. He was feeling burnt out. He had been through some pretty massive health issues. He, at that point in time, had just gone through his second round of thyroid cancer.
Mm.
And so we were at a crossroads of really making some decisions, I guess, on kind of where we wanted to go from here. And we, at that point, came up with a couple different ideas. Really, he just wanted a break from what he was doing to make the decision as to whether he or not he wanted to come back to what he was doing. I decided to take some time off. So we sold our house, put everything in storage. We bought an RV and took our 2 cats, and we just traveled in our RV for 9 months.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah,
How was that with a 1-year-old?
it was great.
Yeah,
It was
cool.
amazing. Yeah, very free to not be tied to possessions and just to really get out and be able to explore.
I'd be curious, maybe name 2 kind of top highlights of that time and then two big challenges that you ran into during that time.
Yeah, I mean, the highlights, so that's really when my art came back into play. So, just having more time, having more freedom, being out exploring nature. So we were moving every 2 to 3 days to a new place. Places we had never been before, just being out hiking and being outside and just really enjoying all the beauty that, you know, the outdoors have to offer. And really just being able to focus on our daughter and our family and my husband's health was just amazing. Challenges, I guess. Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, one of the big challenges was we were still dealing with some of my husband's health stuff. So, it wasn't all smooth sailing. He still had a lot of, virtual check-ins, appointments, things like that he had to follow up on as far as health and wellness and, really kind of just getting him to a place where he was in a better mindset too. Like I said, he had been kind of wrapped up in this corporate culture and just needed a break from that. And so focusing just on positive mindset and well-being and health and wellness and all that good stuff.
So I can kind of hear, as you mentioned before, that's how your art displays, or at least how I interpret your art when I view it, that dichotomy of structure and lack of structure, for lack of a better term. But I think that maybe this gets us to that point where, what was it like to make that decision to say, I'm not going back to corporate and I'm going to focus on something creative, knowing that is a challenge, maybe within every country, but particularly within the United States?
Yeah, well, and I was lucky to have the support of my husband. We talked about several different avenues. Once we came back after the 9 months, he ended up going back to his job, and, it was a good reset for him, but he decided that, it made sense for him to go back. So I had that support of not feeling like I had to go back into a structured environment, having a little bit more freedom, right? Where my full-time job is raising our daughter and being at home with our daughter. And then, discussing some different options. When she did start school, I had a couple of different ideas of what I wanted to do with my days. And he was very supportive of, me continuing down this path. There were some other things that happened just really organically around that time as well that helped support the journey. I had a former coworker that I worked with for years in HR that I had maintained contact with. And at the time was in a new job, had a coworker that was starting a brand new art gallery. It was a new concept online art gallery and then offering art rental to people. And so really the idea was this farm to table, finding local artists, having folks that sign up for monthly memberships. And then those folks can rent artwork. We'll deliver the artwork, hang it in your home. And then the idea is that people are paying these monthly memberships. The art is on their walls. They fall in love with the art and then they purchase the art.
Got it.
So I was invited into this space to be an artist. And so I was an artist for the first 3 months of this kind of soft opening of this company. And the company was starting to add other folks to the volunteer. The company wasn't making money at this point, but bringing other folks as volunteers with a promise of shares as the company grew. And so they ended up bringing me in with my business background and then having my art background as an art curator. So I took on art curator role and was working probably 60 hours a week as a volunteer. And then that ended up transitioning into me being a partner in the company. And I was running all the social media. I was doing marketing. I was doing a lot of the things. So that really kind of just parlayed me down this route of being a full-time professional artist, and then hopefully eventually this company taking off, being able to do some other things that would provide a consistent income as well.
Yeah. And I thought, what was the outcome of that?
Yeah. So the company failed, unfortunately. So this all really kind of got started in 2019. We did survive the pandemic. But the original owner of the company really just lost interest in the whole thing. And he was not an artist. He didn't have a background in art. He really just had this cool concept, cool idea to do this thing where, he was seeing all these businesses were being successful with these subscription models. And so he kind of just had this idea that, hey, why don't we do this with art? And, you see it being done with food and all these other things, all these other subscriptions. Let's try it with art because no one else is doing this. And so it got to a point where I was basically running his company on a full-time, unpaid volunteer status.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was just super checked out. And so I decided to take a step back and really just hone in, focus on my art. My husband at that point in time was going through his third round of thyroid cancer. And so I really just decided to kind of, reel everything in and focus on my family, focus on my art and simplify life a bit more. And once I did that, once I basically stopped running his company, he shut everything down. So unfortunately, that never took off, but it was a really cool experience while I was a part of it. Honestly, I loved it. And he offered to hand the business over to me. But the way that the business had been set up and the logistics were not how I would have set the company up. And so there would have been a lot of money that would have needed to have been dumped into it, a lot of reworking. And I just didn't, at that point in time, have the time or energy to do that. So I walked away.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any insight into how you're doing since then. I see your, posts on LinkedIn, and I'm going to make an assumption that it's going relatively well at this point.
It is. So that was in 21 is when I walked away from that. And we've had a lot of life changes since then. We ended up kind of having a repeat of what I told you previously, where we sold our house and took the RV out. So we did that again. So 2020, the pandemic, our daughter was in school, in public school. And we actually had the opportunity with her to do remote school through the county for another 2 years following the pandemic. And we found a piece of land that we bought. We knew we wanted to build a house in the country. And so we sold our house in the suburbs. We took our RV, we went to Arizona, and she did remote school while we were there. We continued to work, both of us work remotely on the road while we had a house built here in the country in Colorado, and then came back and moved into our home now that we built about 2 years ago. And so just kind of was another opportunity to just hit the restart button and explore and focus on artwork and focus on, really kind of realigning my business and my vision and what I wanted to do with my own personal art journey.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think that takes what I'm thinking about now is your not just upbringing and what you dealt with, but your entire, it's a hell of a journey that you've been on. A lot of learning opportunities and a lot of success and a lot of challenges at the same time. So I don't know if you think about this at all or not, but when you think of, if you do think about legacy, what does that mean to you? What is it that you try to communicate to your daughter, right? To prepare her for the life ahead and hopefully make it a bit smoother than maybe some of the things that you had to go through. But how do you think about that? What is it that you want to convey about your experience, and how are you conveying that as you go?
Yeah. Well, my art is really a reflect of life and my experiences and my journey. And there have been a lot of bumps and it's been a roller coaster. And there have been good times, but there have also been a lot of challenging times, throughout my experience with my husband's illnesses and, just the infertility and, a lot of the tricky things that we have dealt with and continue to deal with. And I think that, just the travel and the RV life and getting out and really kind of being able to enjoy and appreciate nature and travel has also inspired a lot of my work. So it's kind of helped to balance out some of those challenging times by having the flexibility. My husband and I have the flexibility to, with the work that we do, to be able to get out and travel and see different places and meet different people and have these different experiences. And so I think really the message for my daughter has been, first of all, to do what you love, choose something in life that you're passionate about, and, don't make it about the money or what you feel like other people think you should be doing. Because I think that if I look back on my journey, that was really kind of where I was at in my younger years. Was everything was all around focused on structure, right? And so a
Yeah.
lot of that has come apart in my adult life. My husband's traveled a lot for work and he's lived in many different countries and amongst different cultures and people and had all these life experiences. And so once I met him, all that structure really started to break apart.
Yeah.
And the focus was on experiences.
Yeah.
And he really taught me that you don't have to always follow the rules and that, it's okay to ask for what you want. It's okay to speak up. It's okay to make your own rules and create your own path.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I've continued to do, I think, just in my journey, my life journey, and in my art journey, is to not feel like I have to be contained or confined by the rules and the structure of what other people think I should be doing. And so my daughter is actually an artist. She's an incredible artist. She's only 11, but she loves to draw and paint and is incredibly creative and intuitive. And so she's already, I feel like, on the right path. And I think some of that has just been her exposure to, our lifestyle. And we are very unstructured. And we do have, we have roles as parents, but we have also lived a very unstructured, very non-routine life compared to, a lot of her friends that she's grown up around where, again, right, they've lived in the same place, same school, same people. And she's had the opportunity multiple times to kind of just pick up and travel and move and live out of an RV and then go back to living out of a house and be in-person school and then do remote school. So, just she definitely gets that message that, I want her to pursue her dreams. And, if that's being an artist and having her own business, we've already had the discussions that she may not go to college. A lot of people right now with kids her age are talking about saving for their kids' college funds and
Oh, yeah.
focusing on that and figuring that out. And that's definitely something that is part of our conversation, but it's also part of the conversation that may not be her path.
Sure.
And so, the money that's being saved for quote unquote college may end up going to her traveling or starting her own business or doing something outside of the norm.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny. I was going to ask, well, not ask, but to me, it was like the structure you grew up in, and it sounds like your daughter is not within that box.
Yeah, I love that. Just having that freedom and flexibility for her to be able to make that decision and choose and not feel pressured or not feel like there's only one option, right?
Yeah. Going from structured to unstructured, the last thing that I will touch on is, although many of us would love to just live a completely unstructured life, and some of those people that we know do that, I don't know that I've ever been able to fully get away from some structure, but I do have friends who have, for better and worse, in certain scenarios. On the legal front, so you do have a business, you've got a lot of art. Your husband, of course, is successful in what he does. And with his health scares, where are you guys at with the wills and medical proxies and all of that sort of thing?
Yeah. So when our daughter was born, we met with an attorney and everything is locked into place.
Yeah.
So all of that just made sense from many different perspectives, from the fact that we now have a child and, just financial perspective, health perspective, all of our estate planning, all of our medical stuff, all of our financial stuff is well locked into place for us and locked into place for her as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will say that it was lovely speaking with you. I sincere gratitude for your time. I know it's the most important thing that we have, and so I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope that you and your family continue to grow and live an unstructured life and be successful and find happiness. And so I again just really appreciate your time and sharing your story.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, this has been fun.
You can't hang on to yourself. You don't have to try not to hang on to yourself. It can't be done, and that is salvation. The most important thing for anyone to realize is that you and every person you see will soon be dead.